So, chapter 7 starts talking about ethics and business ethics, which is a study of what makes up good and bad conduct as related to business activities. Talks about social responsibility of business, concerns of business entities, about profit seeking and profit seeking activities and their unintended impact on others directly or indirectly involved. Then it talks about individual codes of ethics that it's adopted from like, parents, religion, peers, teachers, siblings, and environment. It talks about corporate code of ethics, their corporate cultures, the evolution of production and marketing, emphasis uh, over corporations' early years. Talks about industry codes of ethics, the hybrid model, which is honest and fair dealings with customers, acceptable levels of safety, efficacy, and cleanliness, non-deceptive advertising, that kind of thing. Talks about professional codes of ethics, like it's mandatory university educational training before licensing, and continuing education requirements, licensing examination requirements, and lists a few more things. Talks about professional codes of ethics in the insurance and finance a little bit. Talks about codes of ethics in law, American Bar Association's model rules of professional responsibility. Talks about the code of conduct for transnational corporations. It's pretty much respect for national sovereignty in countries where a company operates, adherence to sociocultural values, and respect for human rights. And chapter 8 talks about dimensions of the international environment of business, political, economic, cultural, and legal. Talks about the political dimensions, which is pretty much international business requires dealing with different types of governments, ranging from democracies to totalitarian. The economic dimensions are pretty much factors that affect business investment, so like differences in size and economic growth rate, impact of central planning versus a market economy, and that sort of thing. Cultural dimensions defines culture as a learned norms of a society based on values, beliefs, and attitudes. Talks about corruption and trade in the United States Foreign Corrupt Practice Act of 1977. And then it goes on to talk about legal dimensions, which is pretty much national legal system of their own country and that of the home country, and talks about how like when you're venturing into a foreign country or foreign territory, business managers should be guided by that country's legal system and international law. Then talks about international law, which is they talk about public international law, which governs the relationships between nation states. Private international law governs relationships between private parties involved in transactions across borders. Talks about methods of engaging in international business, which is trade, international licensing and franchising, and then direct investment And then it goes on to talk about international trade, which pretty much exporting goods and services from a country and importing goods and services into the country. Talks about international licensing, which is contractual agreements by which a company makes its intellectual property available to a foreign individual or company in return for payment. Talks about international franchising, which is an agreement which a licensor permits a licensee to market its goods or services in a particular nation. And it talks about a direct investment in a foreign subsidiary where a company that is wholly or partially owned and controlled by a company based in another country, which helps expand foreign markets and acquiring foreign resources and raw materials. Talks about risk of engaging in international business. Talks about application of the sovereign immunity doctrine and the active state doctrine to disputes between foreign states and U.S. firms. Talks about sovereign immunity doctrine, which is foreign-owned private property that has been expropriated is immune from the jurisdiction of courts in the owner's country. Talks about export and import controls. Export controls are applied by governments to militarily sensitive goods to prevent unfriendly nations from obtaining them. Import controls are put in place to prevent foreign companies from destroying home industries. Talks about the World Trade Organization, which is aimed at eliminating barriers to trade, and it's affected corporate investment decision making, which makes it less risky for multinationals to source parts from countries where labor is cheap. Talks about the European Union and the structure of the European Union. It has Council of Ministers, the EU Commission, Parliament, European Court of Justice, and the European Central Bank. And it talks about the impact of the European Union, basically the unity of law, economic integration, and political union. It talks about NAFTA, which was ratified in 1994 and aimed at eliminating barriers to free flow of goods, services, and investments between Canada, the US, and Mexico. Talks about global dispute resolution, arbitration, and litigation.